Hey everybody, thanks for stopping by. Well, let's face it, GPU availability is next to nothing. And if you can find one, it's 2 to 3 times the retail price, so what's the point? What I want to show you today is an alternative. It's the Ryzen 5 3400G. It's an APU with integrated graphics, which means you do not need a GPU. Let's get to it. All right, the motherboard is out of the box. It is an micro ATX motherboard. Picked this up off of Newegg for about $80. It's gonna do just fine for this build. So let's go ahead and get our CPU ready. First off, you just wanna pull up this tension bar right here. Go all the way up just like that. You have your Ryzen CPU. And right here is the gold triangle. You want to line it up on the AM4 socket. There is a triangle right here, so you want to match that up. You want to hold the CPU directly above the socket. And when you insert this, you don't need to put any pressure on it. You just want to let gravity seat the CPU. Let's do that nice and gently. And just like that, I heard it fall down. We're going to take this tension bar. There will be a little bit of pressure. Go ahead and fight through it. And go ahead and put that tension bar underneath the plastic clip like so. The CPU has been installed. Next, let's go for the RAM. I got a 2x16 kit of Vengeance rated at 3200 megahertz. Usually on the B450 motherboard, you want to populate channels 2 and 4, these DIMM slots here. So 2 and 4. So let's go ahead and get those inserted, and they can only go in one way, so make sure to orientate them the right way. Let's go ahead and get those inserted. Nice and firm. It feels like you're putting too much pressure on them if you're doing it for the first time, but go ahead and do it. You should hear that satisfying click. Let's do the second RAM stick. Line it up so. And a satisfying click should be coming. And there it is, CPU and RAMs installed. Let's go ahead and install the Wraith cooler. Now to do that, we have to take these plastic clips off because they are not compatible with the stock cooler. So let's do that really quick. Make sure to save those 2 plastic clips and those 4 screws in case you want to upgrade your cooler in the future that requires those 2 plastic clips. All right, now it's time to install the cooler that came with my Ryzen 3400G. If you bought yours brand new, there will be some pre-applied thermal paste here. This is not, so I'm going to get some thermal paste. Let's go ahead and add the pea-sized drop to our CPU. Like so, that should be just plenty. All right, now it's time to orientate the CPU cooler the correct way. You can see I have the AMD logo pointing towards the left. I'm just going to go dead center, make sure those 4 screws on the cooler line up with the back plate. Gently put it down. Make sure they're aligned. Let's get our screwdriver out. I'm going to put some medium pressure on the cooler. I'm going to start on the top right hand corner. I'm going to make sure I get a few threads in. Right there I have. I'm going to keep equal pressure on the CPU cooler. I'm going to crisscross and go down here, make sure I get a few threads in. And I'm just going to go around the CPU cooler. No need to worry about when to stop because these screws will bottom out. Let's get this thing installed. All right, the cooler is securely installed to the CPU/motherboard. Again, those screws did bottom out. The next thing we want to do is plug in our CPU fan header. On this motherboard, it is located at the very top right here. And in most scenarios on your B450 motherboard, B550 motherboards, it will be located towards the top. Let's go ahead and plug that in. Really easy, just like that. While you're down here, you can do a little cable management if you wish, or we can do that later. And there we go. Everything's installed on the motherboard. If now you have an NVMe drive, motherboard has a slot right here. But for this particular build, we'll be using a SATA SSD because we're trying to build the cheapest gaming PC possible. And I'll show you how to install this a little bit later in the video. All right, let's go ahead and get ready to put this in our case. All right, before we install the motherboard, make sure you grab your I/O shield and install it. It is fairly easy. You just want to have a few satisfying clicks on each of the four corners. And there we go. The I/O shield is installed. And you also want to double check that your case has the appropriate standoffs for your motherboard. If not, make sure to check your user's manual and install those. Here we go with the motherboard. I'm going to come in at an angle. I'm going to line up the I/O with the I/O shield. Make sure that those marry up just like that. And I'm going to push it nice and firmly into the I/O shield. And you can see this hole right here. There is a standoff that's going to come through the motherboard and help secure the motherboard to the case. And in turn, it will line up the screw holes so that you can secure the motherboard. So let's get the screws. It's always helpful to have a magnetic screwdriver. When you screw these screws in, you do not want to crush the motherboard. You just want to do it nice and firm. Let's get these installed. And just like that, your motherboard is securely installed to your case. Let's move on. All right, the next thing we're going to do is install our front panel connectors. Of course, we got the power switch, we got a USB 3.1, and we have a headphone jack. Unfortunately, our cheap motherboard is not compatible. We will not be installing the USB to C, but that's okay because this is a budget build. Let's go ahead and install the front panel connectors. Those are the three panel connectors we'll be installing. I'm going to get those routed underneath the case. All right, the three panel connectors have been routed towards the bottom of my case. I'm going to start with the panel connector. Right here in the bottom right-hand corner of the motherboard. They can only go in one way, so make sure to check your alignment. The next thing I'm going to do is my USB 3.1. Again, it can only go in one way. And then last but not least, the HD audio located at the bottom left-hand corner of the case. Again, this can only go in one way. And just like that, all three front panel connectors have been installed. Let's move it on. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is install the power supply. You can see 650 watts from EVGA, total overkill for this build. I entered it into PCPartPicker.com and this total build is like 140 watts, but that does leave some room for upgradability. But again, this is not brand new. It costs about 50 bucks. Let's go ahead and get this installed. All right, for this power supply does have a fan on the bottom, and in my case, I do have ventilation on the bottom. So I'm going to point my fan down. Go ahead and slide it right into the case right here. And now all I'm going to do is secure the power supply to the case. And just like that, the power supply is secure. All right, and this build is really simple. I only need 3 cables. I need the 24-pin power supply. I need the additional CPU power for the 8-pin on top of the motherboard. And then I do need some SATA power for my SATA SSD and for my fans. Let's go ahead and plug these in. But while I have the back side of the case open, I'm going to install my one and only hard drive. It is a SATA SSD that I got from Best Buy. It's a Western Digital Easy Store, 480 gigabytes. And you can see right here I have two spaces for them. I've already taken off the bracket and have installed the SSD to that bracket. So now all we have to do is adhere it to the side of the case right here. But before we put it on the side of the case, we want to plug in the SATA power and then the SATA cable to the motherboard. So let's go ahead and do the power right here. Here is the power connector, and again, the power connector can only go in one way, so make sure you orientate it correctly and pop it in just like that. Now we need the SATA cable, and the SATA cable, just like the power connector, can only go in one way. And you should hear a satisfying click. Close enough, but it did click. So now I have both cables plugged in. Now we just have to adhere it to the case. And it should be pretty easy. You see these four holes here. I have these four pegs. It's just going to line up. Just like that. You hear the little snap. It should stay there. But we are definitely going to secure it all the way with a screw. And there we go, the hard drive is installed. All right, let's go ahead and plug in the 24-pin power connector. Make sure it clips and it's nice and snug. Next, I'm going to go for the 8-pin power connector at the top of my motherboard. I just heard it click. That's secure. And then the last thing I'm going to do is plug in my SATA connection for my SSD. I believe this motherboard has 4 SATA ports. I am going to use SATA 1. And there we go. 24-pin, 8-pin, and hard drive, the SATA. All right, next I'm going to install my case fans. I bought the cheapest RGB fans I can find on Amazon. This 3-pack of up here fans cost me about $15. I'm going to do 2 intake fans in the front, and I'm just going to do 1 exhaust fan in the back. I do not anticipate the Ryzen 3400G being that hot, so 3 fans should be just fine. Now, since anybody who is watching this video, everybody's cases is just a little bit different, so I'm going to go ahead and do this off camera, screwing in the fans. I will be back to you right now with them installed. Okay, you can see the 2 front intake fans. Here are the wires here, the rear exhaust. Again, I'm going to plug this directly into the power supply. So let's go ahead and connect the 2 intake fans here. These Molex connectors. They just connect just like that, nice and easy. Here's the power supply to the Molex. Just like that, those 2 fans are connected to the power. Now if we come up here to the exhaust fan, we're going to do the exact same thing and just plug it right into the power connector. Whoops, wrong way. Just like that. The fans are good to go with just a little bit of cable management. And we are set. All right, the fans were the last step. No GPU needed. Now, on the hard drive that I installed, the SATA SSD, it already has Windows 10 installed on it. So if you need help installing a fresh install of Windows 10, I'm going to leave this link up here in the top right-hand corner, and also leave a link in the description of how to install Windows 10 from a USB drive. Let's hope we did this right. I'm going to go ahead and push the power button. Fans are spinning. The RGB is on. Let's see if the Windows operating system does come up. Waiting, waiting, still waiting. See something happening with the monitor. And there it is. It has posted. All right, it is that simple to put together this Ryzen 5 3400G. If you found this information useful, support the channel by giving it a thumbs up, and as always, I will see you in the next video. Thanks, folks.